Let's Talk About Kidneys takes a deep dive into the chronic kidney disease patient journey. We're here to inspire meaningful conversations and to help people living with CKD gain a full understanding of their disease. In today's episode of Let's Talk About Kidneys, Dr. Ankit Mehta and Shanna Camp share valuable insights about the importance of research studies for patients with chronic kidney disease. Dr. Mehta and Shanna, I am so glad that we're going to be able to sit down and talk today because I truly can't wait to learn more about the research elements that go into chronic kidney disease and how Dallas Nephrology Associates is involved, because I've had a chance to meet a lot of the team and talk about these other aspects of the work. And I think what y'all do is such an important aspect of when we look into the future as well. So first, Shanna, I would love to ask you, what is a clinical trial? We break it down.
The clinical trials that we do at Dallas Nephrology are either device studies or we'll do new drug therapy studies. So we can run the gamut on any kind of clinical trial with medications, infusions.
Runs the gamut of that.
Yes.
How long do they go? Like, is it something that happens over the span of years, or?
We have some studies that will last about 12 weeks, and then we have other studies that'll be about 6 years, 7 years.
Interesting. And so that runs for looking at non-progressive chronic kidney disease as well as progressive. Does it, do you separate those at all?
All of it. All of it, yes. And it breaks down to different indications depending on the specific diagnosis of the patients and their type of kidney disease that they have.
And so at any one time, how many do y'all have going on?
We currently have 21 ongoing studies, and we have about 15 studies that we're working on starting up.
Oh. Well, and so what role for you does an investigator and other study team members play during a clinical trial?
So the principal investigator is ultimately responsible for the conduct of the trial. So it starts from patient safety, patient well-being, to whether this patient is eligible for this study. Do they meet all the inclusion criteria? Do they have any exclusion criteria? As well as during the trial, if they have an unexpected, unanticipated event, then the principal investigator is responsible.
Controlling the variables, as they say. Am
That's
I right?
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I took science, Yeah. And so how often are y'all in communication? Like, what's the relationship between your two roles, when you're doing these clinical trials?
Too
Daily.
much.
Daily.
Daily.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, several times a day.
We're texting back and forth several times a day regarding various studies and various patients and things happening back and forth.
And so, in terms of documentation, is that something that everyone is responsible for, or is that your role specifically?
Documentation is something that I hate about clinical trials.
Yeah.
That's probably the only thing I hate about clinical trials. And every time I visit Shanna, there'll be a nice file for me to sign and look over.
Yeah.
I mean, these could be labs or these could be adverse events that have happened in the study at different locations. And so there is a lot of paperwork involved. That's true.
Tedious.
Very.
Well, because then I'm sure there's approval levels and things like that, which we'll probably get into a little bit more just in terms of what the results, how those are certified or whatever that looks like at the end. So are there phases or stages of clinical trials?
We do phase 1 through 4 clinical trials, 1 being basically the first time in humans.
Mm-hmm.
4 being an aftermarket. The drug is already on the market. It's already been proven safe, but they're testing it for another indication where they've seen that it helps out with this indication as well as what it's already marketed for. So we'll do those studies as well.
And so this may seem like a silly question, but is it around chronic kidney disease in and of itself or the drugs specifically for it? Like the clinical trials that you do?
So different trials have different indications. So there are some studies and drugs that are directed just to chronic kidney disease.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times now we can subdivide this as the cause of the chronic kidney disease and have drugs directed towards that. For example, diabetic kidney disease or high blood pressure related kidney disease. Or there are these rare kidney diseases like Fabry and Alport's that are genetic, and they have very limited treatment options for patients right now. So that's one of the greatest advantages of doing a clinical trial is from a patient standpoint, you're able to get treatment for something which may not be treatable in the current scenario. So
Well, and so why are these clinical trials or research studies important and necessary?
So we can have medication. That's every drug that is out there, every medication has been run through a clinical research study.
Absolutely. Well, and so why should a patient consider volunteering actually for one of these clinical trials that y'all are doing?
So if you take a step back and look at most trials, they're designed towards standard of care versus new drug. So if as a patient, if you're enrolled in the trial, you're at least going to get the standard of care treatment, whether
Hmm.
that is just monitoring of the disease or actual treatment with medications. Then if you're actually assigned to the treatment arm, in addition to the standard of care, you get something extra.
Mm.
So there is no harm. I mean, I shouldn't say no harm, but there is minimal risk,
Hmm.
and the trials are designed in such a way to minimize that risk and see if we can intervene early if there is a risk that's identified.
Hmm.
But that's the benefit that you get
And
something new.
and so say somebody does volunteer, what does that relationship or process start to look like when somebody decides that they are going to take part in a clinical trial?
So the first step is a chart review and a discussion from the principal investigator with the patient's treating physician
Mm.
to see whether they would be a good patient for the study. And once that's done, the patient would actually come in for an informed consent where we would go over, I think it's like a 25-page document,
Yeah,
but
21 to 25
they're given
pages.
adequate time to read through the document.
Mm.
And then the investigator meets with the patient and goes over all the possible risks in the study. As long as the patient is comfortable with that, then we move forward with whether they would qualify or not.
And so does that normally happen within, a couple of weeks time, or is that something like, I can imagine if you don't have people volunteering what that looks like.
It's different for every study and every patient. We give the patient as much time as they need to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So it may take 3 months for a patient to come in and decide that this is something that they want to do. Or we have some patients that call us and say, "Hey, I want to try something new," and we have to slow them down to make sure that they are completely aware of what they're getting into.
Yes.
Yes.
Rehash.
Yes.
Again,
Yeah.
just so we're clear,
Yeah.
these are the risks.
Yes.
And so do you have multiple patients involved in a single trial, and then you've got multiple trials going on at the
Correct.
same time?
Hmm.
And so is your role in all of that being able to, I don't know, uh, project manage the trials in and of itself?
I'm the research manager, and we have a team of 5 other coordinators, and we have a recruiter. And those coordinators, they manage everything in these studies. They will, from identifying patients, becoming very close, and they have personal relationships with the patients because they're all in it together.
Mm-hmm.
They will also be texting Dr. Mehta frequently. So, as a principal investigator, he's getting hit by at least 4 or 5 of us each day. So
But they
there's
keep me on track, right?
That's-
Most of
That's
the
true.
times there's so many moving parts that the coordinator is able to pick up sooner, and they'll be like, "Hey, do you want to follow up this patient sooner or later?" Or
Mm-hmm.
so it's the communication is very very important.
So how is Dallas Nephrology Associates involved in clinical research today?
So Dallas Nephrology Associates has built the entity Renal Disease Research Institute, and the sole purpose is clinical research for that entity. So I'm going to refer to them as RDRI.
Mhm.
RDRI has a bunch of trials in kidney disease. So if you take a step back and think about kidney diseases and research, we're in an infancy. We're like oncology was 40 years back, where you use the same chemotherapy no matter what cancer you have. I feel as if chronic kidney disease is in that era where
Wow.
you use the same 2 or 3 drugs no matter what kind of kidney disease you have, and it's a
Mhm.
mixed bag. The problem has been we've had very limited research that's dedicated towards kidney and the causes of kidney disease. And that's what we're trying to change.
Absolutely. I can imagine, especially because there's so many different peripheral, things that can affect kidney disease out,
Right.
if we're talking about diabetes, something with your heart,
Mhm.
all of those elements then affect what medications. And if there's only two, you only have two ways to potentially
Exactly.
address the issue. So I'd love to talk more about RDRI. And so, what types of clinical studies are currently available for patients with kidney disease?
We have, you mean for the different indications?
Yeah.
We are currently enrolling in studies for polycystic kidney disease. We have Alport syndrome. We have
Fabry's.
Fabry's, IgA
We,
nephropathy.
we have some kidney diseases where your sole manifestation is just protein loss in the urine.
Mm.
So things like IgA nephropathy, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. These are in the old days all bunched up together and had only the same drug,
Mm.
but we have separate studies going on with all of these.
Yeah. Well, and especially if somebody's listening right now, being able to hear their specific type of that, right, actually feels
Right.
like they're getting more of a custom care plan. And I can, from everyone I've talked with so far, that seems like such an important aspect is being able to be tailored to a patient and their history.
And we also are also doing studies for post-transplant studies as well, trying to prevent rejection and
Infection,
BK viremia. Yeah.
infection in transplant patients.
Yes.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. So, how do I decide if I'm a patient if I want to participate in a clinical trial?
So I would talk to my treating physician first. If your treating physician is aware of some places that are doing clinical trials in your particular indication, that would be the best way. There are other websites that you can go to. Clinicaltrials.gov is a national website that lists all the clinical trials that are currently enrolling. And then NIDDK, the National Institute of Diabetes, Digestive, and Kidney Diseases, they have their own websites that list clinical trials that are currently enrolling and whether you would qualify for one or
Yeah,
not.
so you can be a DNA patient and then obviously work with DNA nephrologists, but then also work through RDRI specifically on those clinical trials. And then if they want to seek elsewhere, they can.
That's very true. And we've had patients reach out to us that are not even DNA patients.
You do not have to be a DNA patient to do a study with RDRI.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's definitely an important piece.
Yes.
We've had patients that have never seen Dallas nephrology or any nephrologist in the past and are reaching out because they've heard about the study and that we're doing the study, and so they would drive
Interesting.
in for the
They've
study.
never seen a nephrologist.
That's right. Yeah.
How does that come about?
That primary care doctor has been managing their illness, and so but we're branching out and looking for other opportunities.
And so where could I find out more information about the clinical research trials?
For us, you could
Yeah.
go to our website at, what is it, RDRI?
Renal Disease Research Institute. So
It
rdri.com.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can just Google RDRI, or you could do Renal Disease Research Institute.
Okay, perfect. And through there, do they apply through the website for some of the trials?
Yes. Yes, they can.
Okay, so they don't have to be located in Dallas either.
Correct.
Correct.
'Cause this is open to some of those rural locations and rural patients who
That
aren't
is
necessarily
very
in the
true.
city center.
Exactly. We've had patients drive in 3 or 4 hours just to be able to be on the study here.
Yes.
So I was going to say, does it require regular appointments? Like, is it a nephrologist incorporating a clinical trial information and questions in their appointment, or is this something that's being, anything related to the clinical trial is being talked about in a separate?
We have
Conversation.
specific protocols that we'll follow, and those protocols will determine the scheduling of how frequently we see the patient or speak to the patient. So we will follow that protocol as well as the patient continues to see their treating nephrologist. And there will be communication between the principal investigator and the treating nephrologist to make sure that the patient's getting the best care.
Got it. Okay.
So
Yeah.
these two appointments would run in parallel, so to speak. So the clinical trials frequently will see the patients more often
Mm-hmm.
because we're looking for adverse effects
Mhm.
and making sure the patient's safety is not compromised. And the treating nephrologist or primary care physician, whoever has referred them, will not be checking in as often, but they will be getting all the information from us as well.
I was going to say, so how important, I mean, it sounds like the relationship between you as an investigator and the nephrologist is an incredibly tight relationship.
It happens a lot. Yes, that it happens a lot where I get a call saying, "Hey, I'm seeing the patient or patient in common. How are they doing? What is the last trial? I'm seeing that patient this afternoon. What does the
Mhm.
last labs look like?" So yeah, that it's very important that the the patient's physicians involved in the decision making.
I was going to say that was one of the questions that, how do I contact someone about if I am considering applying to be a part of a clinical trial? How could I get in contact with someone to be able to acquire any information about my participation? So would that be through the website as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any final words around the importance of clinical research studies today? How they're happening today and what that means for the future? I'd love for you to share your thoughts.
I think that clinical research is the most important thing we have for patient care and treatment. If we can't find the new medications and the devices to help these patients with their quality of life, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
And as he said, there's very little treatments for patients that have the specific kidney disease, and we need to do better.
Yeah. Well, and so it sounds like if not, do you see the amount of clinical trials continuing to increase? I'm sure there's only a certain a load amount that you can handle at any one time given patients, but is that something that because it's such an infancy standpoint of research that they're going to continue doing more and more?
I have no doubt that's correct. I think there will be a lot more research going forward. And if you just look at RDRI and dialysis nephrology, we have the ability to do a lot more research than we are currently doing.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of the number of patients that we follow, we should be able to do and enroll a lot more patients into clinical research.
So what do you feel like is the biggest breakthrough that's happened over the last, let's say, 5 years?
Well, there are plenty. I'm trying to think how to prioritize. In the kidney world, there is a new class of medication called SGLT2 inhibitors. Those are actually diabetes medicines, but they've been shown to improve kidney disease as well. Then there's anemia and kidney disease. We now have pills for anemia and kidney disease, which we used to have shots, and patients had to come to the clinic every week, every 2 weeks to get those shots. And now we have oral medications that will do pretty much the same. And I think those two probably are the biggest developments in the last 2 years.
Has RDRI been involved in any clinical studies that have received FDA approval?
Yes. So the RDRI has been involved in an itch study. Let me back up. So dialysis patients frequently suffer from chronic itch. And there have been a lot of investigation into trying to figure out why and what to do about it. One of the studies that we were involved in, which Dr. Akin-Fullerin is a principal investigator for, it actually is a medication that helps with this chronic itch, and it got FDA approval just recently.
Fantastic. So. That's something you lose sleep over. Truly, that's got to be a game changer for so many patients.
Quality of life is much better on those patients.
So I'm curious, from your perspective, working with DNA, being a part of DNA overall and helping slow the progression of chronic kidney disease, what's been the biggest impact for you, like in your career?
I love working for DNA. I have enjoyed working with our different investigators and our nephrologists. I am sometimes just wowed by how smart and dedicated and how much they care and how open they are for us, that don't know as much about these diseases to actually take the time to help explain to us as well. So when we're speaking with patients and participants, that we can actually give better and informed information. I think that it's a great place to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the work that you're doing, the research is, like you said, critically important, because if we want to look at what things look like 20 years from now, ideally you have far more options, to be able to extend, as a nephrologist or just as part of the support care team, to be able to offer to patients that are that much more personalized.
I think we have to reach precision medicine. What we have right now are broad strokes. We need to be able to customize the patient's care to the degree that will impact them, rather than saying the same medicine's going to work for, you have high blood pressure, here, take a pill and go away.
Yeah.
No, we need to be able to have precise control of how patients do.
Well, I'm sure patients are incredibly grateful for the work that you do, even if you feel like you're absolutely crazy and running around all the time. Hopefully your work continues and continues to grow even more. Thank you all so much for taking the time today, though, to be able to share a little bit more about what that looks like.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. Learn more about Dallas Nephrology Associates at www.dneph.com. That's DNEPH.com. And if you found the information valuable, be sure to share with those also impacted by chronic kidney disease. Dallas Nephrology Associates DNA podcast series, Let's Talk About Kidneys, is provided for general information purposes only and does not replace the need to talk with a healthcare professional about your unique situation, care, and options. Our goal is to provide you with as much information as possible so you can be as informed as possible. Reference to any specific product, service, entity, or organization does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by DNA. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity or organization they represent. The views and opinions expressed by DNA employees, contractors, or guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of DNA or any of its representatives. Some of the resources identified in the podcast are links to other websites. These other websites may have differing privacy policies from those of DNA. Please be aware that the internet sites available through these links and the material that you may find there are not under the control of DNA. DNA shall have no responsibility for the accuracy, legality, or content of the external site or subsequent links. Contact the external site for answers to questions regarding its content. The resources included or referenced in the podcast and on the website are provided simply as a service. DNA does not recommend, approve, or endorse any of the content on the linked sites. The content provided on this website and in the podcast is not medical advice and should not be used to evaluate, diagnose, treat, or correct any medical condition. The content is solely intended to educate users regarding chronic kidney disease, end-stage renal disease, ESRD, end-stage kidney disease, ESKD, and related conditions, and ESRD, ESKD treatment options. None of the information provided on this website or referenced in the podcast is substitute for contacting a healthcare professional.